Some contemporary philosophers believe that other famous philosophers could be trying to fool you.
What's your opinion about non-analytical philosophy?
I despise it. I genuinely believe that many of the people who are doing it, indeed who are quite famous, are frauds.
In this video we will summarize several academic papers that explore the methods and techniques that some philosophers may have used to, allegedly, act improperly. The Guru Effect. The Guru Effect is the title of a paper by Dan Sperber that investigates the allure of obscurantist language. Obscure statements lend themselves to be interpreted in multiple ways, a fact well known in astrology and often used in divination practices. When astrologers and diviners make vague, ambiguous statements, they rely on our interpretative charity and pattern recognition abilities, two generally useful traits in life, to help them in fooling their subjects. Sperber suggests that continental philosophers may be applying a similar trick, and he cites Derrida and Heidegger as possible examples. If a reader manages to find a suitable interpretation of a passage that appears profound, the ruse has worked. However, if a statement remains obscure, the reader faces two options. Either the author was being obscure on purpose, or he wanted to convey a thought too deep and articulated for plain and simple expression. Readers will often choose the latter option, as it is usually rational to defer to authority when in intellectual doubt, but this can lead to problems. If everyone defers to authority, they risk reinforcing a false aura of profundity, potentially creating a vicious cycle of runaway authority that can lead to sectarian or cultish tendencies. This cycle may be further reinforced by infusing the rhetoric with mysterious and hyperbolic statements that lack empirical evidence, thereby contributing to the creation of a perverted illusion of wisdom.
La mort est du domaine de la foi. Vous avez bien raison de croire que vous allez mourir, bien sûr. Ça vous soutient. Si vous n'y croyez pas, est-ce que vous pourriez supporter la vie que vous avez?
The paper also explains that there is often a social benefit to pretend to understand obscure writings, while calling nonsense may involve the cost of being marginalized or to appear intellectually stale and flat. So, the problem deepens. Additionally, an important psychological bias is relevant at this point. The sunk cost fallacy, that tells us that the more one is invested in something, the less willing they are to accept a loss on their investment, even if it would be the right thing to do. Consequently, the greater the interpretative effort spent trying to understand an author, the greater the time spent studying him, the less willing we will be to accept that his writings might simply be nonsense or too nebulous to decipher. These psychological and social dynamics may contribute to the creation of self-sustaining power structures that uphold meritless intellectual traditions. Epistemic defense mechanisms. Epistemic defense mechanisms are strategies to answer critiques to a certain theory that are effectively integrated into the conceptual structure of the theory itself, effectively rendering the theory immune from critique. This occurs when disconfirming evidence is incorporated into a theory as a predicted outcome, making it impossible for any kind of evidence to disprove the theory. For instance, within the psychic community, there is a belief that the presence of inquisitive minds disturbs paranormal phenomena. Consequently, when a psychic is tested in a scientific setting and is found to have no powers, The disconfirming evidence is interpreted as a confirmation of the theory. Another example can be observed in religious settings, when devotees claim that dinosaur fossils were put there to test believers. Rather than representing counter-evidence, these fossils are seen as a confirmation of the existence of Satan, and by extension of God. In a similar manner, some psychoanalysts argue that people attack psychoanalysis because they harbour the very repressed wishes and complexes that the theory reveals. The critiques to psychoanalysis are seen as stemming from unconscious motivations, merely disguised as rational arguments, and therefore there is little reason to take them seriously, self-immunizing the theory. Reportedly, a related defense mechanism may be used by radical social constructivists and postmodern philosophers who believe there are no objective canons of rationality. Their stance then becomes unassailable by any kind of logical argument, as any critique can be dismissed as merely another subjective viewpoint, lacking any objective basis for evaluation. This has been classified as an epistemic defense mechanism, protecting a theory from all critique by not allowing for any kind of disconfirming evidence. Could it be that the very philosophy that pointed its finger against the powerful oppressive mechanisms of religion ultimately resorted to similar tactics to uphold its own deceptive authority? The Motte and Bailey fallacy. Not many people know that the motte and Bailey fallacy was coined to describe a specific fallacious stratagem reportedly used by some postmodern academics. The stratagem involves initially presenting a surprising thesis or a significant discovery worthy of academic accolades, but when questioned or challenged, reverting back to a much weaker version of the claim, pretending that the weaker thesis was the intended assertion all along. For instance, Derrida has sometimes appeared to put forth the strong claim that meanings are radically undecidable, and that no objective reality exists outside of language, which seems to imply the impossibility of fixed or correct interpretations. But when challenged, philosophers of the caliber of John Searle say he would retreat to the less controversial claim that meaning is context-dependent, a statement that is hardly interesting or novel. Analogously, Bruno Latour has been understood to put forth the view that science is just a social construct. So scientific facts may have no more claim to objective truth than any other cultural belief. But when questioned, his detractors say, he would retreat to the trivial position that scientific practices are influenced by socio-cultural and historical contexts. Foucault is another author that has been accused of employing this tactic. The accusers say that first he would put forth the claim that all knowledge is merely a construct of power relations, and thus there is no objective truth. But when asked for clarifications, he would back down to the banality that power relations play a significant role in shaping what is accepted as truth. Equivocating definitions. Equivocating definitions is a practice that involves using a word or a term in different senses without clearly distinguishing between these different uses. Usually it takes the form of implicitly redefining a word that already has a commonly accepted meaning, and then using the word in the implicitly redefined sense without informing the reader. A strategy may consist of first using a word in its redefined sense, then presenting the redefinition as if it had already been established as the deeper content of the concept. Finally, the impression of profundity is sealed by employing passages that distort both meanings simultaneously. In the references cited by this video, Foucault and Lyotard are singled out as having utilized this phony mechanism. And that about ends our brief summary.